Hey guys, Pupsker here. Today we're doing something a little different, a little weird. I'm reading a Warframe fanfic because I got bored. So I hope you guys enjoy. This one is called Mind Over Matter, Nyx X Atlas. I'll include a link to it down below as well. So yeah, no editing in this one, just straight up fanfic. So let's get started. Atlas was not the most sociable Warframe. If anything, he preferred to stay as far away from all of the other Warframes as possible. Except Naros. They actually got along quite well due to their similar builds. All the other Warframes, however, he avoided like their plague, especially Nidus and Saren, who literally were the plague. It's not that he didn't like them, he just liked the simple things in life, punching a Grineer in the gonads, smashing Corpus robotics and boulders, and crushing the infested with his rumblers. All of that with no small talk, no planning, and no conversation. Just business. Okay. Usually, he was never picked for squad missions because of this social ineptness, but every so often, he was needed, or even wanted to go along. This was one of those times. An abandoned Grineer ship floated around the solar system with an extremely deadly payload, a Fomorian core. Of course, the Grineer and Corpus both wanted to claim it for their own reasons, but their efforts were fruitless as the other two continued to clash with each other along with the main threat aboard the vessel. The large population of infested and the bodies were only adding to their growing numbers. He had been paired with the Warframe Nyx for this mission as a bodyguard. Their job, sabotage the core and get out. The resulting explosion would obliterate all leftover infested and deny Vahek another core for his Fomorian fleet. Atlas dropped from the vents and surveyed his surroundings. Nothing but dead bodies. The target was soon marked on his HUD, 750 meters away. Both he and Nyx made their way to the large door, activating both pads simultaneously. The door shakily opened, sparking and stuttering as it rose. On the other side was a charger feasting on the corpse of a fallen Grineer soldier. Atlas drew his Sylvia and Aegis and prepared to dispatch the creature when Nyx put her hand on his bulky shoulder. Atlas tensed for a moment but quickly relaxed. She pointed to the creature who shuddered before finally going still. A sharp noise filled the room and what looked to be a hologram of Nyx above the charger. The creature was fully under her control. They could use it as a scout without causing the infested horde to stir. By the way, this one's pretty long, so it's probably going to be like 7 minutes. I don't know, I'm not too sure. It moved forward up the stairs to the next room, with the two Warframes close behind it. As both of them ascended, Atlas's eyes locked onto Nyx's large rear. He had never noticed just how big her ass was until this point. Her hips seductively moved left to right with every step, which accentuated her already large butt. He quickly dispersed those thoughts. Now was not the time for these lust-filled thoughts. Just as the charger moved on to the next room ahead of the two Nyx, stopped Atlas. From the charger's eyes, she could see many infested in the next room. Probably too many to fight. They'd have to find another way to the core. That's when she pointed to the air vent above them. He nodded and then double-jumped before slamming his fist into the metal covering, causing it to fly up and thrash against the top of the vent. The loud noise would have definitely been heard by the infested, so they had to move quick. Nyx was the first in, followed by Atlas. They closed the vent and went still. Mere moments after they had taken refuge in the vent, the infested swarmed the room. They tried to find the source of the sound, coming with nothing. After minutes of searching, Nyx pointed forward and began to slowly crawl forward through the small vent. Atlas wanted to follow her, but his eyes had locked up with her jiggly rear. Every time she slid her knees forward, her butt bounced, and his eyes followed. Nyx turned to face him and tilted her head down, confused on why Atlas had come to a standstill. He broke from his trance and began to move forward, hoping that he hadn't been caught. He tried to calm himself down. Wouldn't be too much longer before they reached their objective. After that, he could go back to being alone. it would give him some much needed time to clear his head. By the way, this fan fiction is very, very poorly written. I've fixed so many errors already. Just by the way, I just wanted you to know that, which is why it's sometimes really fucking hard to read, because it's not good. Anyways, as they made it farther, the vent began to widen, allowing Atlas to crawl next to Nyx instead of behind her. He quickly moved forward, trying to take the lead if possible, when he noticed his energy began to deplete. In front of the pair was a sharp turn in the vent, and from that sharp turn came a grotesque green tentacle. It had a corrupted red hue, which signaled an eczemus unit, obviously parasitic. It would take a few seconds for Nyx's mind control to take effect, and fighting it in such a small vent could cause the vent to collapse and cause more infested to come. With very little energy left, it was a horrible idea to take on more than a few at this moment. Thinking quickly, Atlas tackled Nyx into a tiny cubby in the vent before raising a stone wall with the last of his energy. There was barely any space to move in the tiny part of the vent. A green light moved past the rock wall. The sound of the ancients' mushy footsteps were getting farther away before it went silent. Before Atlas could lower the wall, Nyx grabbed him. The energy had not returned to them, signaling the eczemus had not fully left. Instead, it was either waiting or patrolling. Atlas slammed his head against the wall, denting it slightly. He was trapped in the small vent with Nyx, who was sitting in his lap with a powerful infested guarding their escape. He couldn't see how his situation could get any worse. Suddenly, Nyx began to shift while trying to get a view through Atlas's wall. Her soft buns had squished against his groin. Every time she shifted, she unknowingly rubbed against Atlas's crotch. Slowly, his happy camper began to swell in his tent. Jesus Christ, this is rough. He hoped that she wouldn't notice, and somehow she didn't, much to his surprise. However, she moved once more and slipped Atlas's dick in between her cheeks, hot-dogging it. Atlas didn't deny how good it felt. It was a nice change of pace. Just at the wrong time, her movements became more fluid as her hips began to gyrate faster and faster. He took a deep breath, trying to calm himself. He was confused. She had to have noticed what she was doing to him by now. His primal urges were catching up to him, but before he did anything, he realized something. Nyx had the power to read minds. This is a mess. Possibly amazing, but a mess. She turned around to face him, swinging her legs around his hips. She continued to grind her snatch against his groin. Her juices began to drool onto him. How long had she been planning this? Since they got here? Nyx shook her head side to side. Since he noticed he was staring at her rear, she nodded. She pushed Atlas' cloak away from his chest and pulled down his pants. She grabbed the large member and slowly began to stroke. It was already rock hard from Nyx's earlier movements. His large hands traveled backwards to her squishy butt. This is rough. Giving it a few test squeezes before giving it a firm yet quick smack. She began to stroke with more vigor with each smack. In response, one hand moved to Nyx's snatch, rubbing and fingering as he matched speeds of her own strokes through her tight leggings. Both seemed to be very pent up as neither gave way, hoping that through one's release the other would soon come after. As they approached the very end, Nyx suddenly stopped. She lifted large ass and quickly lowered her tight leggings, revealing her unblemished skin and bubble butt. Her area was drooling with anticipation, and her urgency reflected it. She lined up Atlas's member with her snatch and took it in one go. Yeah, this is definitely just a mess of a fan fiction, but we're almost done, so by God, gotta finish. Yeah, I'm gonna throw in as many innuendos as possible. Both Warframes threw their heads back in pleasure. Nyx's hips began to raise before dropping onto Atlas's crotch with a loud schmack. That's when Atlas began to remember where they were. He tried to warn her about the sounds, but realized his body wasn't responding. In fact, he had begun to meet her ass halfway. He had no explanation for why he was moving until he noticed his energy reserves had refilled, which meant he could have been inflicted with Nyx's mind control. His speed began to rise with each smack. Lovely. The feeling amplifying with every thrust. His hands began to play with her breast before he moved back to her ass. He had been so obsessed with and gave it another hard squeeze. One of her hands traveled past Atlas's legs to support herself, while the other traveled to her own breast. She slammed herself against Atlas, loving every second. Slowly, Atlas began to regain feeling in his body from Nyx's control, albeit slowly, probably to his intense strength. Oh, due to his intense strength. Sorry, it's poorly written. If anything, Atlas was going to finish on his own terms. Yeah, this is a mess. Definitely a mess. He sunk his hands into her cheeks before pulling her off his throbbing cock. Much to her displeasure, her drooling hole needed to be filled once again as she struggled to reconnect the two. She continually wiggled her rear in an attempt to get Atlas to fuck her again. He flipped her over onto her stomach to get a better view before slamming violently into her, resulting in a spray of her fluids. He reached over and roughly grabbed her breasts, squeezing and groping at his leisure. Every smack of his pelvis against her ass was pure bliss. Ripples in the meat of her rump were clearly visible. The floor began to be coated in a mix of their combined bodily fluids. Both Warframes were obscenely close to an orgasm. Nyx being the closest, as this new position allowed Atlas to pound her deepest points. She clenched the ground and gave in. Her pussy began to convulse and squeeze Atlas like a vice. He raised his hand and gave her meaty butt another large smack before exploding into her. He held her tightly as he unloaded his burning seed into her. It stayed that way for about 20 seconds. As both of them finished up, Atlas pulled out with a slimy popping noise. The mix of liquids poured out of Nyx's snatch as she sighed in pure ecstasy. The initial stress of the mission had left Atlas thanks to Nyx's caring. The mission went off without a hitch, with the core being sabotaged and exploding in space. In the clan dojo, Atlas had actually began to hang around with the other Warframes as long as Nyx was nearby. The other Warframes had no idea what caused this mysterious change in personality, but it was quickly accepted. Unknown to them, Atlas's rumblers weren't the only thing causing the ground to shake that night. That was really bad. That was just, that was a rough one, everybody. That was real rough. Like, there are so many errors in spelling, grammar, and just spelling and grammar in this godforsaken fan fiction. So they clearly didn't proofread. That being said, it's a fan fiction, so who gives a shit? Also, it's just not good. No, I'll give them this. It was really funny, but by God, was it? Oh God, it was not good. It was a very questionable read. Don't quite know why I wanted to do this, but hey, I tried to pick one that wasn't too cringy, but they're all really cringy. So yeah, that was the end of that. Don't quite know why I wanted to read that, but hey, now you guys have that. You're welcome. If you liked it, like it. And I will see you people next time with hopefully not this. Yup.